Well, I'll be honest. This isn't a fun review to do. Like, at all. You see, I plan on covering everything that Video61 has released as far as homebrew games go, and so far, I have their complete 7800 collection. I reviewed Animal Keeper several months back, and I liked it. Then, I reviewed Venture back in December of last year, and I raved over it. It was by far their best release that I've played. But now we have to take a look at Delta Space Arena, which is an interpretation of Omega Race. If you've played Omega Race before, then you know that it's kind of this weird asteroids thing set on a sort of racetrack, I guess, and it's just always been kind of odd to me. But I think people out there really like it. So is this a good version of a game I'm already not big on? Or is this something to be skipped? And I'll be objective as I always am. So if this is a good version of Omega Race, I'll tell you. But I unfortunately think that might not be the case. I was patiently waiting for Video61's next Atari 7800 release after Animal Keeper and Venture, because I feel the guys over there are really on a roll, and they have some exciting stuff in the works, at least in my opinion. I honestly can't wait for the 7800 version of Tile Smashers. But we got Delta Space Arena after those games, and as I said, Omega Race was never really my bag. But given the excellent track record of Video61 and their programmer Peter, I knew I was going to pick this one up ASAP. And I have to say that the plain white text label on the cartridge isn't doing the game any favors. It didn't increase my excitement for playing it, let's just say that. But the label does not matter, it's what's on the inside of the cartridge that counts. So I fired up Delta Space Arena, and I have to say, the boring label reflects what's on the cart well enough. There are some brilliant ideas here. I like the idea of the power-ups. I like the different enemies and the different layouts of the stages. Heck, the difficulty progresses in a fantastic way too. But for every positive, there is an overwhelming negative as well. So let's just start with the graphics. Now to me at least, it's very apparent that this was originally an Atari 5200 game. Something about it screams 5200 to me, which is not a bad thing, mind you. But I don't feel like it's really pushing that console or this one. I sort of find it graphically boring if I'm being honest. But I could forgive that if it wasn't for all the flicker and slowdown. The 7800 is known for being able to push sprites like crazy, without the flicker of its competition at the time. But this game feels like it's just not programmed well. All the enemies sort of dance in and out of view, and if it's on purpose or a chosen graphical touch, then I think it was an extremely poor one. But I don't think it was on purpose. Overall, I couldn't help but to be disappointed by what I was seeing. Now, Video61 games always use stock audio on the Atari 7800, at least as far as I know. But I don't expect anything crazy like pokey audio. But again, the audio here feels boring at worst and just too safe at best. There's little jingles that play, but often I hear one sound getting cut out for others, and there was nothing that made me want to keep on listening while I was playing. The sound, much like the graphics, were a major letdown to me. So unfortunately, Delta Space Arena and the guys at Video61 are 0 for 2 at this point in my review. But we have gameplay next, and that could be a saving grace. And to an extent, it is. Like I said, I always found Omega Race to be an odd game in more ways than one. But I do like this interpretation as far as gameplay goes. The control feels reminiscent of Asteroids, but you do have some options in your control method. The left button always engages your thrusters and moves your ship forward, and the right button is always your brake. And let me tell you, this baby stops on a dime, which is absolutely needed if you don't want to slam into enemies and obstacles repeatedly. But you can also choose what pushing back on the joystick does. You can have it do nothing, you can have it move you in reverse, but be aware that you're going to reverse the same way you move forward using the momentum mechanics, so it's sort of slow to activate. You can also have pushing back on the joystick make you stop, which is essentially the same as the right button, but it might be easier to pull off in a pinch. But my favorite, by far, is making it reverse your direction, giving you the ability to escape or dodge enemy fire quickly. Now what I mean is rather than using the momentum-based thruster to move you backwards, it points you in the opposite direction immediately, and you start moving that way. This is what I recommend you set down on the joystick to if you want to give this game a try. And as I said earlier, there is a nice difficulty curve. The game is very easy at first, with only one enemy that really fires at you and leaves behind little hard-to-see mines. The other enemies just sort of follow the track until you destroy the single enemy capable of shooting. Then, one of those simple do-nothing enemies transform into the next firing enemy. And eventually you'll have some variety, as there are enemies who move faster, enemies who shoot where you are rather than in random directions, and more. The layouts of the stages change in interesting ways that let you sort of ambush and intercept the enemies in ways that can be really fun and strategic. While I do think the game is a bit on the easy side, at least when you master the controls, it can be fun. But there is one major flaw that I mentioned earlier that ruins the experience for me, and that flaw is the slowdown. As things ramp up and the game gets more chaotic and challenging, they also get slower and the flicker seems to get worse. I'm just not sure why the fellas released this game in this state. Again, Omega Race was never up my alley, but I would have called it an average game and a fun one for fans of the original. But as it stands, due to these major flaws, I can't recommend you spend money on this one. Not when you can get Animal Keeper and Venture instead. Those games have a fun factor and a sense of quality that I believe this one is missing. And I don't want to bash on homebrew games and make the developers feel bad. That's never my goal. These guys do things I could never do. But I also have an obligation to protect my viewers' money and advise them where to spend it when it comes to Atari stuff. And as we're going to find out in my trademarked Atari Network pros and cons section, you just might want to stick your money somewhere else for the time being. Let's start with the pros. I really enjoy the level design here, and I like the idea of the power-ups. The difficulty increases in a smooth manner, and I think a variety of control options was a smart idea. But unfortunately, we're already at the cons, and I have some major ones to touch on. And let's start with the flicker and slowdown. I cannot forgive this on an Atari 7800 game. It negatively affects the gameplay in a major way, and it makes it not really worth playing. It needed more time in the oven, I think, and those issues needed ironed out. But there's also the power-ups that also feel like a big miss to me. It isn't evident enough what they do, and the power-up with the K just outright kills you. I'm never a fan of negative power-ups, especially ones that make you die out of nowhere. The graphics and sound are a bit boring, and something I just never really felt impressed by. That's why we're going to give Delta Space Arena for the Atari 7800 2 Pro-Line controllers out of 5. I suggest you support any and all homebrew developers by purchasing the games that interest you and the games you like, but this one isn't a good purchase. Instead, head over to Video61 and buy some new or used Atari 2600 and 7800 games, or better yet, homebrews like Venture and Animal Keeper. Those games have more intriguing gameplay and audio, and overall are very good and well programmed. But with all that said, I want to hear from you guys. Have you played Delta Space Arena? If so, do you agree with my review, or do you disagree? Also, have you played Omega Race before? Do you like that game? Well, let me know this and more in the comments down below. And with all that said, it's time for me to sign off. I'm the 7800 Pro Gamer, Delta Space Cadet here at the Atari Network, and I'd like to thank you all for joining me in another review. Remember to stay classy, Atarians, and I'll see you in the next one.